Some griefs are so heavy they root you to the ground like ancient trees, the kind that makes you forget there was ever a time before the pain, a version of yourself that knew how to smile without it feeling like betrayal. For Sarah, that grief had a specific location, a small grave marker at the edge of Thornwick Cemetery, surrounded by wildflowers she planted with hands that shook from hunger more often than not. She'd been there for 42 days straight when the Beast King found her, not visiting, living, a makeshift shelter of canvas and prayers, a girl of 16 refusing to leave her mother's resting place because it was the last thing in the world that was truly hers. The groundskeeper had tried to move her. The city guards had threatened her with vagrancy charges. But Sarah stayed, silent and stubborn, guarding a grave like it might disappear if she looked away. Sarah's mother had been a seamstress in the merchant district, skilled with needle and thread, though her real talent was making people feel seen. She'd take in the difficult alterations other shops refused, stay up late finishing rush orders for nervous brides, always with a kind word and a steady hand. Sarah grew up in the back room of that shop, learning stitches and patterns before she could properly read. Her father had died before she was born, a soldier who never came home from the Southern campaigns. It was always just the two of them against the world, and that had been enough, more than enough. Then came the fever. It swept through the lower districts like wildfire, killing dozens before the royal physicians could identify the source. Contaminated water from a neglected well that city officials had ignored complaints about for months. Sarah's mother lasted 8 days, long enough to make Sarah promise she'd keep living, keep fighting, keep being the brilliant girl she'd raised. Not long enough to see her daughter truly hear those words. The funeral was small.
Sarah had sold everything in the shop to pay for it, left with nothing but the clothes she wore and a silver thimble her mother had inherited from her own mother. She stood at that grave after everyone else left and realized she had nowhere to go. The shop was sold to cover debts. She had no other family. The orphanages were overcrowded and brutal. So she stayed at the cemetery, built a shelter from scraps, survived on what little Lenny she could make doing mending work for people who pitied her enough to hire a homeless girl. And she guarded that grave like it was a fortress, because it was the only thing she had left that connected her to the person who'd loved her most. The Beast King came to Thornwick Cemetery on a cold morning that smelled like coming snow. Sarah saw him from her shelter, a tall figure in a dark cloak, moving through the roads of graves with the kind of stillness that suggested he wasn't just visiting, he was remembering.
She'd heard stories about King Theon her whole life, the immortal ruler who could shift into a massive wolf, the warrior who'd fought in wars her grandmother's grandmother had only heard about in legends, the cold, distant monarch who ruled with an iron fist. She'd never expected to see him in a public cemetery, walking alone among graves like a normal person, carrying normal grief. He stopped at a marker near the old section, knelt down, stayed there for long minutes with his head bowed. When he finally stood and turned to leave, his path took him directly past Sarah's shelter. She tried to make herself small, invisible. It didn't work. He stopped, looked at her makeshift camp with an expression she couldn't quite read, then at the fresh grave she was clearly guarding. "How long have you been here?" His voice was deeper than she expected, but not unkind. She debated lying, decided truth was easier than maintaining a fiction. 42 days, Your Majesty, since my mother died."
He glanced at her thin frame, the patched clothing, the supplies that were clearly running low. "You're living here?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I have nowhere else to go, and because she's here, I won't leave her alone." Theon studied her with those unsettling eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone into uncomfortable truths. "What's your name?" "Sarah Whitmore." He was silent for a moment. Then, "I knew your mother. Years ago. She did alterations on some formal wear for a court event, refused to rush the work even when I offered to pay double, said quality mattered more than speed. That sounds like her. She never cut corners, even when it cost her. He looked back at the grave. The fever outbreak, I heard about it. 23 people dead because city officials ignored infrastructure problems. Heads rolled for that. Not literally, but several people lost their positions. Doesn't bring anyone back though, does it? No, Sarah said quietly. It doesn't. Theon turned her attention back to her.
You're 16? 17 in 2 months. You have any family? Anyone who could take you in? She shook her head. Just me. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the kind of quiet that happens when two people recognize shared understanding in each other. Finally, Theon spoke again. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Would you consider leaving this grave if you had somewhere worthwhile to go? Somewhere that honored your mother's memory instead of forcing you to abandon it? She felt tears burn behind her eyes. There's nowhere like that. What if there was? What if I told you the royal household needs skilled textile workers, people who understand quality craftsmanship, people your mother taught? Sarah's breath caught. Why would you help me? You don't know me. He gestured to the grave. Because she took pride in her work. Because you're living in a cemetery out of loyalty.
And because I've been alive long enough to know that talent and determination shouldn't be wasted just because someone's circumstances are brutal. So I'm offering you a position. Apprentice in the Royal Textile Workshop. Room and board included. Proper training, fair wages. You'd learn from master craftspeople and eventually contribute to projects that matter. She wanted to believe him, but years of hardship had taught her to be skeptical of kindness. What's the catch? The catch is you have to actually show up and do the work. The workshop doesn't tolerate laziness or drama, but if you're half as skilled as your mother and a tenth as stubborn as you seem, you'll do fine. Sarah looked at her mother's grave, at the wildflowers she'd planted, at the small shelter that had been home for 6 weeks. I can't just leave her. You're not leaving her. You're living. There's a difference. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small pouch. This should cover a proper headstone. Something permanent with her name and your father's carved together. The cemetery will maintain it. You can visit whenever you want. But Sarah, she didn't die so you could slowly starve yourself on her grave. She died hoping you'd survive. Honor that. The words hit like a physical blow because they were exactly what her mother would have said. Sarah took the pouch with shaking hands. Why do you care? Because I've stood at too many graves of people I loved. Because immortality means watching everyone else turn to dust. And because if I can prevent one person from wasting their life on grief when they could be living, maybe that means something. He started to walk away, then paused. The workshop is in the east wing of the royal complex. Ask for Master Cordelia. Tell her I sent you. She'll handle the rest. Bring your mother's thimble if you still have it. She'll want to see what kind of family you come from. Sarah clutched the silver thimble in her pocket. When should I come? Tomorrow. Today, you say goodbye properly. He left without waiting for a response, and Sarah stood in the morning cold, wondering if grief had finally driven her mad enough to hallucinate conversations with kings. The Royal Textile Workshop was nothing like she expected. It wasn't sterile or intimidating. It was warm, filled with natural light and the comforting sounds of looms and needles and quiet conversation. Master Cordelia was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and gentle hands who examined Sarah's mother's thimble like it was a religious artifact. Your mother's work, she said after a moment. I recognize the quality. She did a commission for us 8 years ago, wedding dress detail work, absolute perfection. She should have been working here instead of that cramped shop. Sarah felt defensive pride surge. She liked her shop.
She liked serving regular people, not just nobility. Cordelia smiled. That's exactly what she told me when I tried to recruit her.
Said she'd rather make 10 working women feel beautiful than one duchess feel superior. I respected that. Still do. She gestured around the workshop. This isn't about serving nobility, child. It's about preserving craft. We make everything from ceremonial robes to military uniforms to gifts for foreign dignitaries. Quality matters because it represents the kingdom. Your mother understood that better than most. Over the next weeks, Sarah discovered she'd inherited more than just her mother's thimble. The skills were there, buried under grief but intact. The way to judge fabric quality by touch, the precise tension needed for different stitches, the patience to unpick bad work and start over rather than settle for adequate. Master Cordelia pushed her hard but fairly. The other apprentices were wary at first, this girl the king had personally sent, but competence earned respect faster than royal favor. Sarah threw herself into the work with desperate intensity.
Every perfect seam was proof she'd learned something valuable. Every completed project was evidence her mother's teaching hadn't died with her. She visited the cemetery every week, sat by the new headstone that bore both her parents' names, and told her mother about what she was learning, about the workshops and the projects, and the way Master Cordelia reminded her sometimes of home. The grave didn't answer, but somehow Sarah felt heard anyway. 3 months into her apprenticeship, King Theon summoned her to his study. Sarah went with nervousness coiling in her stomach, convinced she'd done something wrong. Instead, she found him surrounded by maps and reports, looking exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. She sat. He poured 2 glasses of water, slid one across to her. "How are you settling in?" "Fine, Your Majesty. The workshop is everything you said it would be." He nodded. "Cordelia says you're talented."
Possibly exceptional with more training. She also says you work yourself sick some nights, that you're in the workshop at dawn and leave after midnight. Sarah flushed. "I just want to be good enough." "Good enough for what?" "To deserve being here. To make sure you didn't waste your mercy on someone who couldn't live up to it." Theon leaned back. "Let me tell you something about mercy, Sarah. It's not a transaction. I didn't help you because I expected something back. I helped you because watching talented people destroy themselves over grief is a waste I refuse to tolerate anymore. You don't owe me proof of worth. You owe yourself a life that doesn't revolve around punishment." "But I should have saved her," Sarah said, the words breaking out before she could stop them. "I should have noticed she was sick sooner. Should have forced her to see a physician before it got so bad. Should have done something other than just watch her die. You were a child, caring for a parent through a deadly fever. What exactly do you think you could have done differently?" "I don't know, but there had to be something." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a letter. "This is from 20 years ago. A report about the well that caused the contamination. Citizens complained about the water quality. The city official responsible ignored it because fixing infrastructure isn't glamorous and doesn't win political points. Your mother died because someone in power decided convenience mattered more than lives. That's not your fault." She felt something crack in her chest. Then whose fault is it? The official who ignored the reports? The supervisors who didn't check on him? The system that made it possible for negligence to turn fatal? There's plenty of blame to go around, but none of it belongs to a 16-year-old girl who loved her mother and did everything she could with what she had. I fired the responsible parties, changed the oversight procedures, made sure it can't happen again."
"Does that bring your mother back?" "No." "Does it ease your grief?" "Probably not. But it means her death mattered. It meant something changed." The tears came hot and angry. "I don't want change. I want her back." "I know. Believe me, I know. But we don't get that choice. We only get to decide what we do with the grief. Let it destroy us, or let it make us better. Your mother taught you a craft, taught you quality and integrity, and taking pride in work that matters. Honor that by being extraordinary,
not by punishing yourself for surviving. Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. Is that what you do? Honor the people you've lost by being extraordinary? Theon's expression went distant. I honor them by trying not to become the kind of king who'd make their sacrifices meaningless. 300 years of rule, Sarah. That's a lot of graves. A lot of people I cared about who are gone. If I spent all my time at those graves, I'd never actually do the work that makes their belief in me worthwhile. So yes.
I honor them by being better than my grief. She looked at this immortal king who somehow understood the specific weight of her pain. What was her name? The person you visit at the cemetery? He seemed surprised by the question, then quietly answered. Mira. She was my wife, 200 years ago. We had 30 years together before illness took her. I go to her grave when I need to remember what I'm protecting, when the weight of ruling gets too heavy and I forget why it matters. She grounds me, even now, even after all this time. Sarah felt the edges of her grief shift slightly. Does it get easier? The missing them part? No, but you get stronger, better at carrying it, better at finding joy alongside the sadness, instead of letting sadness consume everything. She teaches me that every time I visit, that love doesn't end with death. It just changes shape. They sat in silence for a while. Then Theon pulled out a sealed document. I have a proposition for you.
One that honors your mother's memory in a specific way. What kind of proposition? The royal family sponsors scholarships for skilled craftspeople, full training, living expenses, eventual placements in positions where they can teach others. I want to establish one in your mother's name, the Whitmore Fellowship, specifically for textile artists from working-class backgrounds who show exceptional promise. You'd be the first recipient. Her breath caught. Why would you do that? Because your mother believed quality craftsmanship mattered, regardless of someone's birth status, because she took pride in serving regular people and teaching them her skills. This fellowship would make sure others like her and like you have opportunities that don't depend on luck or tragedy. It would mean something permanent, something that outlives all of us. Sarah thought about her mother's shop, about all the people who'd come through those doors looking for someone who'd treat them with dignity.
About the craft passed down through generations, always on the edge of being lost, because talent without opportunity dies young. Yes, she said. Yes, I want that. Then it's done. He slid the document across. Your mother's name will be attached to something that matters, and you'll have the training to become the master craftsperson she knew you could be. Sarah picked up the document with trembling hands. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. Then don't thank me. Honor it. Be extraordinary. Teach others. Make sure her legacy isn't just a grave marker, but a living tradition that helps people. That's worth more than gratitude. She left his study with the document clutched to her chest and purpose burning in her heart, where before there'd only been grief. The years that followed transformed Sarah in ways she couldn't have imagined that day in the cemetery. She became Master Cordelia's star apprentice, then eventually a master in her own right.
The Whitmore Fellowship brought dozens of talented textile artists through the royal workshops, each one learning not just craft, but the values Sarah's mother had embodied: quality over speed, integrity over convenience, taking pride in work that served everyone, not just the powerful. Sarah expanded the program to include outreach in working-class districts, free workshops for children, scholarships for those who couldn't afford formal training. She built something that mattered, and every stitch felt like a conversation with her mother. King Theon watched her progress with what Sarah eventually recognized as paternal pride. He attended her certification ceremony when she achieved master status at 22, commissioned her for special projects that challenged her skills and broadened her expertise. And sometimes late at night when the workshop was empty, they'd sit and talk about grief and memory and the complicated work of honoring the dead by living well.
On the 10th anniversary of her mother's death, Sarah stood at the grave with flowers and a new understanding. The marker was weathered now, but well maintained, surrounded by the kind of wildflowers her mother had loved. She wasn't alone. Theon stood a respectful distance away, visiting his own wife's grave as he did every month. When he finished, he walked over to Sarah. "How are you holding up?" She smiled, and it didn't feel like betrayal anymore. "Good. Really good, actually. I was thinking about something she used to say, that we honor people not by freezing ourselves in grief, but by growing into who they hope we'd become. What would she think of you now?" Sarah looked at the workshop keys in her hand, the master's certification she'd earned, the fellowship that bore her mother's name, the student she was teaching who'd go on to teach others. I think she'd be proud. I think she'd say I finally understood what she meant when she told me to keep living. Theon nodded. "For what it's worth."
I'm proud too. You took tragedy and built something beautiful from it. That's not easy. That's extraordinary. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned that grief doesn't end, but it does transform, that love persists beyond death, and the work we do, and the people we become, and the legacies we choose to build. Before leaving, Sarah placed her hand on her mother's headstone. "Thank you for teaching me that quality matters, for showing me that integrity and craft go hand in hand, for believing I was worth investing in, even when I couldn't see it myself. I'm living, Mama, really living. I hope that makes you proud." The stone didn't answer, but somewhere in the wind and the wildflowers and the warm certainty in her chest, Sarah felt her mother's approval anyway. If this story reminded you that grief can transform into purpose, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment with the word moon if you believe the people we love never truly leave us. Share this video with someone who needs to know that their darkest moment might be the beginning of something extraordinary. Sometimes it takes someone seeing our worth before we can see it ourselves. Thanks for watching. And remember, honoring the dead means living fully, not dying slowly beside their graves.